joined in.
Welcome everyone and thanks for joining us. My name is Ravi Panekkar. I lead the team and group coaching community practice for ICF Bangalore Charter Chapter. The duration of today's masterclass is 1.5 hours with the final 15-20 minutes designated for Q&A. Today's masterclass entails 1 CC and 0.5 RD. Participants who attend the full session would be awarded CC certificates by the chapter. Now, let me introduce Lata. Lata is the founder and principal consultant at OD Mantra, a boutique organizational development firm that helps individuals, teams, and organizations develop the human side of leadership. She is a former corporate executive who founded and led large teams globally. She brings a strong blend of experience in coaching executives and leadership teams. She has been both an internal and external team coach. Additionally, she has trained hundreds of yoga and meditation teachers around the world and loves to blend these powerful ancient practices into her coaching practice. She lives in Pune, volunteers extensively with ICF globally, and is an avid reader, gardener, and volunteer. She also serves on the board of the global nonprofit Enabling Leadership. I'm both thankful and grateful to you, Lata, for taking the time to host the masterclass on turbulence and team coaching, going beyond theories and framework. A very warm welcome to you, Lata, on behalf of ICF Bangalore Charter Chapter's team and group coaching community of practice. Over to you, Lata.
Thank you so much, Ravi, for that generous introduction and for having me. It's a joy to be with fellow coaches, and my namaste to everyone. So Ravi and I were having this conversation when he invited me to look at what could be a good topic for team coaches. And I said, if I look at the repertoire of work that has been done with coaches around the world within ICF India, I think we've covered a lot of theory and approaches and models and frameworks. So we said it's a good change to really look at tools and tips and tricks and things that we can learn from each other and take back as practices, experiment, and be more comfortable with ourselves in these team coaching engagements. So that's how we came up with this theme of turbulence in team coaching. And before we go there, I invite you to take a moment so like Ravi said, I've been a meditation and yoga teacher trainer and a practitioner for about 20 years. So I love to blend these practices. And I'll just like all of us to take a moment to bring ourselves here fully into the session and let go of our day. I know it's been a Monday, which comes with its own baggages. So we'll just take a moment to sit back, making sure that your feet are on the floor and just feeling yourself on the chair. The spine is nice and tall, sitting away from the back of the chair. And you could close your eyes. And behind closed eyes, gently lift your gaze upwards. Yeah. As if you were focusing at that point between the eyebrows. And just relax the body. So just dropping inside your body, checking in for any lingering tension, just relaxing the toes and feet, spreading them nicely on the floor, and then relaxing the calves, both left and right, and the thighs. And then taking a moment to relax your belly. With each in-breath, let the belly expand like a balloon. And as you exhale, let it fall back in. The navel falling towards the spine as you exhale and expanding as you inhale. And then relax your chest. Taking a moment to feel connected to your heart. The heart works very hard, day and night. So just feeling relaxed around the heart and then relaxing your shoulders away from the ears. And you can gently place your palms at the junction of thigh and abdomen. This just gives a nice opening to the heart and at the same time lets you breathe more easily. And then just check in and make sure your chin is parallel to the ground so it's not dropping too much or too high. It's just parallel to the ground. And take a moment to relax your face, the cheeks, the eyes, the eyebrows. And then just noticing each in breath as it comes in and noticing the breath that's flowing out. Just noticing it. And if the mind wanders, just bring it back with each inhale, connecting with your breath. With each exhale, just letting go of all tensions and keeping that mental resolve to be focused and here. Now slowly let go of your practice. And when you feel ready, bring yourself into the room and softly open your eyes. So that was just a little centering practice. We could do it much longer, but the whole world is adopting such practices. So Google, for instance, has something which they call a minute to arrive. And that's also a similar practice, a longer body scan. And I thought, if you just looked that practice up, if you're not familiar with these forms of centering practices, you could just introduce it into your team coaching. Because a few things happen when you do a practice like this. It just helps people be more focused and be in the room with you. They come from a very distracted, overburdened, mind which is wandering all the time, and there is a lot of tension. So, and the other thing that happens, which is there in all of our ancient teachings, is when a group of people sit together and breathe together in unison, there is a certain harmony and decorum that comes into the room, which sets a good tone for you to launch into your team coaching session. So if it's something that is you're comfortable with, play with it and have your own version. But that's a practice right there that you could bring in. So I'll just take a moment to share my slides. So the topic today is turbulence in team coaching. And I wanted to take a moment here to invite some participation. The metaphor of turbulence in team coaching, what does it evoke in you? What comes to mind?
Not aligned to each other, I guess.
Not aligned to each other. That's true. Yeah.
What we experience in the aircraft.
What we experience in the aircraft, absolutely. I think all of us have at some point experienced some turbulence in some degree. And beginner pilots are always nervous about turbulence. And passengers of all ages and experience are nervous about turbulence because we just don't know what will happen. But most of the research shows that rarely has an aircraft ever gotten into serious trouble. Of course, there was this recent incident of Singapore Airlines, but that was more of one person who died because of a heart attack, not because of the plane safety. And there were things that fell off and people got injured. But turbulence can be of various degrees if you just look into it. It can be very minor, which is hardly noticeable, or it can be like about 5 meters, which you kind of sense a little bit. It feels like a nice rocking chair that you're sitting on, and it can be a way higher degree where you're scared for yourself and for others. And the pilots are usually told to do a few things when turbulence happens. And I'm sure you can all rattle it off because we all remember the captain has turned on the seat belt sign is the first thing that goes. And then you're told to stow away your luggage. And there's a whole list of things. And if it is more severe, they get in touch with the air traffic control. But I love this little acronym called ANC that comes from pilots' vocabulary. So ANC basically, A is aviate, N is navigate, and C is communicate. And that is what they're told to do every time, an aircraft is in trouble for whatsoever reason. And I think it's a beautiful analogy to the work that we do, that when we face turbulence, and we'll just explore that in a moment, what should we remember to do? We should remember to continue the coaching, we should remember to navigate well, and our communication is basically playing back to the team that what are we sensing, what's happening, calling them for a little bit of a reflection. And more importantly, it's also in all of the literature on team coaching, they say if you want to have a good assignment going for you, in the first session, you should take a good amount of time to set some norms and expectations. And once there are norms in place, then people kind of stick to that decorum. And it should be not something that we hand down to them, but we jointly arrive at. And in most of my team coaching sessions, each time I go back, I find a way of putting that up there for them as a gentle reminder. And that has been hugely helpful. If there are no norms, then everyone's free to be sometimes it's just loafing that goes on there, right? And you want to be effective, you want to be precise, and you want to get outcomes without feeling too pressured. So having norms and remembering our own protocol to navigate is an important way to work through turbulence. It's a given at some point or the other. We will face it in our team coaching life. So we have a couple of polls, Ravi, and you can pull them up. We wanted to just take stock and understand from you, which of these can contribute most to complexity in team coaching. Now, it's a bit of a play. There are different things, and you might say it's not one, it's multiple of them. But we just wanted you to prioritize, and I think that brings in an interesting aspect too. So we'll just do this poll in a moment. And I'm seeing the chat there now. Yeah, different personalities in the team and expectation mismatches can cause. Yeah, you're so right, Ajit. And teams have personalities, which is different from the individual personalities that is in the room. And that can also be quite turbulent at times. Ajay saying different approaches to a problem, not aligned to each other's goals, says Ram. Oh, thanks for sharing. Ravi, you're saying something? You're on mute.
I just need a minute or two because I don't hold there. Just give me 2 minutes. I'll just figure out.
Okay, take your time. Yeah. So maybe I'll just take a moment to go back to sharing the screen and tell me when you're ready, Ravi. So while you do that, I just wanted to check in with you. Have any of you experienced any of these situations in your team coaching where either the organization is going through a lot of change, or sometimes the future of a team is uncertain and you're invited to do coaching for them, or there is a leader who's toxic, but because he's a good performer, or his other performance metrics are in place and he's a strong leader for the business side, the customers love him, but he's really toxic at work, but still they think the team should go for coaching. Or sometimes you have a very tenured team, which is very complacent and they're happy where they are. They don't really want to change. And you're called in to ensure that they deliver high performance. Or there is a sponsor, a stakeholder who's interfering a lot in the assignment. Or there's a very weak leader. Or maybe the problem is not at the team's end, it's your co-coach. So these were a bunch of team coaching assignments. And at the same time, look at some of these other practices that was mentioned. So one is how can you get more support for yourself, right? So in an aircraft, we fasten the seatbelt. So similarly, in our engagement, what are things that we can do? So engaging a coach supervisor is one of the things that's highly recommended, particularly if you're doing complex assignments. Now, I think in India, the challenge is we don't have many supervisors and supervision opportunities. And so therefore, it's few and far between. And so you could look at other ways. And some of the things that I've taken coach supervision for team coaching when I was doing my course and later on when I was doing a complex assignment. But a lot of times I've also found that this item of working with the co-coach or a mentor or even a friend who understands that business can help you reflect a lot on the approach that you're taking and you playing back what's working, what's not working. But in an ideal world, what ICF also recommends is going for a supervision. Yeah, I found that working with mind-body practices, or what we would call ontology, is hugely helpful. There are two kinds of anxieties that happen in a team coaching room. One is the coach's anxiety that we feel as we encounter some of these spaces. And the other is what the team experiences as a result of some of the exchanges and conversations and the dynamic that they share. And it's also the leader is also in the room. So there could be a whole bunch of things going on there. And people could be nervous and anxious around that. So anything that helps them calm and center is building a good base for your team coaching engagement. Reflection and journaling is another powerful tool. And there are a whole bunch of other practices like visualizations, affirmations. We'll sample some of them in our session today. So, what are some of the leading causes of trouble in team? This is by and large what you will see is if there is a toxic culture in the organization or in that particular team, then that can cause a lot of trouble in the team. They are not aligned. They're just trying to stay safe. So they're not taking any risks. They are worried about their future, and therefore, they're more focused on their next job. A whole bunch of things happen when there's a toxic culture. There's low commitment on accountability is not taken. There's a lot of blaming and shaming that could happen. A lot of this is driven by the leader's mindset also. And one of the fundamental things in the work that I do in the OD space, I've also found, which is so relevant to team coaching, is there are two basic things that you should always include in your diagnostic, which is what is the structure and how does power flow in that team, right? That's very important. And the other is what can you learn about the culture of the team? If you have two of these in place, a good part of your initial hypothesis can be fairly accurate. Once you start working with them, you just confirm, and sometimes you might be surprised there may be more angles to it. But finding out, for instance, is there a matrix structure? Right. And, how does this team get reviewed? What has been their history? what stage of development. So I'm sure as on this community of practice you've done this before, the stages of team development, knowing that and being able to accurately place where the team is on the stages of development. So is it a new team that has come together, or is it a team that has been there for a while? What's been their history, or what is the future of this team? All of these aspects become very, very important. Then what is the politics and what kind of turf wars are going on there that could cause trouble in teams? There could be leadership challenges. So it's not just a toxic leader. Sometimes it is a leader who's not stepping up to his or her role completely. So weak leader. Yeah, so David Clutterbuck even says, if there is a very weak leader, don't take the assignment, because you will not be able to get traction on what you are trying to do. So the personality of the leader and the style of leadership is something that you need to get a handle on early on in the assignment. And then what's the personality of the team? So there may be a bunch of people who look quite happy and jovial together on their own, but when they come together, there is a certain, and in all of the studies on group work that you will see, you'll find this, right? Each team has a personality, and it does go through certain cycles, because there are certain triggers, there are certain learned responses to that, there are reactions, emotions, baggage, all of that comes into play. And so what is the personality of the team? Trying to get a portrait of that is an important assignment early on in the engagement.
So I
Yeah.
created the poll afresh, Lata. You want to run them now?
Yeah,
Or
why
is
don't we
it?
do that?
Oh,
Yeah,
sure.
I'll just stop sharing. Thanks, Ravi.
We can see them on screen, right?
Yeah, we're able to see them. And I encourage all of you to participate. It'll just help us see how we all read situations from our own experience. There's a lot of experience in the room. Okay. About halfway through.
There's no multiple choice. Actually, there are multiple choices possible.
Uh-huh. Okay. It was supposed to be. Okay.
It's difficult to choose one out of them. So many.
So I wanted to force that on you today to see which one you leverage the most.
Yeah, yeah.
37 on 50. Lovely.
I think that's a decent turnout. So, what majority of us seem to be saying is a tenured and troublesome team which is not interested in coaching. And if it is just the leader's agenda and not the team's agenda, that you think could be something that could uh, jeopardize the assignment. And then the organization going through uncertainty is what many of you feel. And the weak leader, yeah. So I'm surprised that partnering with a dominating co-coach, you didn't think that could destabilize the engagement. We're being very nice to each other. It is a big one, and I will touch upon it a little bit.
Well, stop
Okay.
sharing and run
Yeah,
the.
you could stop sharing, Ravi. Thanks. Yeah. So most of us think if it's tenured and the team is not engaged, that's the biggest risk. Yeah.
Want me to run
Okay.
the second one?
Yeah, let's do that. Thanks, Ravi. So which of these practices would be most effective to support for you in a complex engagement? So it's an anonymized poll, but someone did think of something other than this, which they're practicing. If you wish to and feel comfortable, unmute and share. And what I'm seeing most of you saying is working with a supervisor, a co-coach, mentor, and then reflection and journaling and mind-body practices. Yeah. Well, thanks for that. That's helpful to know. And Ravi, maybe you could just save these polls.
Sure.
About 39 have responded, which is excellent. Okay. So I don't know if participants can see. We just shared the results, yeah? So you can see what the bars are looking like.
Yeah. Begins.
Yeah. Okay. So what's interesting here is, the other element which we find value in, right? Of having someone else beyond us when the going gets tough. And that's a very useful thing to keep in mind, that how can you bring in a third perspective into what is going on. Like here at this point, I think it's a good idea to quickly mention this. Usually it is said that if it is a large team, right, a team of more than, let's say, 6 people or more, then it is good to have a co-coach. That's what is broadly recommended as good practice. And if a team is too large, then it is good to just go in and see, is it a real team, or are there teams with sub teams in them which are sitting in the assignment, which then has a whole different dynamic. And it may not be such a good idea to David Clutterbuck often says that it's a very large team, it's just social loafing that's going on there. It cannot be a very productive team if it is very large. But sometimes you'll find organizations just want to economize and they'll say, okay, let's send them for coaching. But when such things happen, it's important for us to get a clear mandate on what results they're expecting. And at the same time, for you to go and do some good diagnostic to figure out what is the real structure, how power flows, and why is it that they're engaging in team coaching, and therefore, what would be optimal. So this whole thing of signing up for the engagement, it's important to look into these aspects. Yeah. So I'll move on. I hope you can see my screen. Yeah. Okay. So this I just picked up from the ICF document. The ask of a team coach is usually we are called in to help build high performance teams. Sometimes it's a new team or it is an existing team that has a mandate, which means significant output in performance. And that is when they are engaging in team coaching. So what are some of the asks? If you just read through them, basically it's identifying, resolving conflict, recognizing power dynamics, building a team that is cohesive, encouraging participation and contribution, which means there is uneven participation, or there are some people who are pulling the load and not everyone is working on top of their license, or to help a team be more autonomous or sustainable in how they do their work. So typically, these are expectations from a team coach, right? And there could be a bunch of other variants, various combinations of these requirements could also come into play. But this kind of gives us a sense of the complexity. Now, one big distinction between a one-to-one coaching and a one-to-many coaching is that team coaching is a lot more directive than one-to-one coaching, where we are in that space where it is more coachee-led, right? But in team coaching, this is important for us to really focus on that. Not when I say directive, not in the sense of autocratic, but there is a lot more of channeling and navigating and setting up that you do as a coach, and which is where it helps to have a team coach, because any of these situations, there is so much going on. So typically, one reference I've often seen is one person is having the conversation, the other person is sitting in the balcony taking a view of what is happening with each individual, what are they sensing, and every kind of gap in time, you get some time to recalibrate and compare notes on what are you noticing, what are you sensing, what needs to be addressed, what is not being said. And there's tremendous value in working with a co-coach, because there is so much of complexity, which is also the reason why supervision is encouraged. So this topic of working with a co-coach, what can be helpful? What can be helpful is you get a lot of support, particularly if it is a team which is sizably, I mean, up to 4 or 5 people, we are able to manage on our own. But beyond that, there's a lot going on amongst them. There is dynamic, there is a certain dynamic with the leader, and a bunch of things which add to the complexity. The power difference, the kind of history that they've had, and how that is playing out. You start to notice a lot of things, and therefore it's too much on our attention to be able to get a full scope. And if it is a more senior team, then all the more complex. Otherwise, what it ends up being is the assignment becomes more like a team building workshop, which is not doing justice to team coaching, right? You're there to solve bigger issues and make the team really high performing, like we saw in the previous slide. So therefore, it's important that we set up with a co-coach. Now, there are a bunch of things that can go wrong when you're working with a co-coach. And I'm going to call out some of them. Feel free to add in the chat what you think can go wrong when you're working with a co-coach. So one is the dynamic between the two of you, right? And what I have often done is, sometimes if I had to work with a co-coach, we try to do some other assignment together and see if we can work together. Or sometimes I go pro bono with them if they have asked me to come in as a co-coach, and just observe and see what is their style. If your styles are very different, and if you're able to find common ground in terms of being complementary to each other, then that works well. But if that is not the case, then there is friction that comes in, and that kind of reduces the resolution of the work that you do together. Yeah. Sometimes you are so cozy and comfortable together that there is no, no edges that are being discussed. And that can also go wrong, go against the assignment, because you need to have bring in different points of view as co-coaches into an assignment. And my third question there was, how can you make it work? And there, I think a few things are very, very important. One is that you know each other and you know your styles, like I shared. The other is, how are you going to set up the assignment? So how are you going to contract with each other? What is in it for them and what is in it for you? So sometimes, like, coaches say that, okay, the one who's leading and who brought in the assignment has a certain finder fee element to it. And if the co-coach is going just as an observer, then the share of fee is lower. But if they're going to have an active participation and y'all are playing an equal a level of coaching work, then it needs to be set up like that after you exclude the finder fee and that account management part of it, which could go up to 20-30% of the fees, because that's the relationship that you manage and maintain. And so it's very important to get clarity on the commercials of the engagement, because that can cause some amount of ruffling of feathers. So, and having very open conversations. And similarly, when you go as a co-coach, taking up that assignment only if it works out for you, right? The other element is the energy level, right? So if you're very energetic and you tend to, have that tendency to taking up the space and being a little dominating, the other person could feel stifled in that engagement. So trying to see how your styles can work with each other is again an important element to identifying a co-coach. The third is the length of time involved and how much, if it's a larger assignment, maybe it is 6-9 months, are they able to make it to those commitments? Are they committed to doing it? Or if they have a very busy schedule, then sometimes you might find that on your team coaching day, you don't have your co-coach. So kind of having a calendar and getting those commitments in place and agreeing and creating transparency becomes very, very important. And the other fundamental thing is in terms of methodology. So there are so many different team coaching schools and methodologies. So which one are you from, and is the person totally bought into that? If someone comes from a systemic team coaching and somebody else is wanting to do just basic team coaching and that's what they're trained in, then there is a learning curve. And so that agreement on what approach you will take and how you'll manage stakeholders and how you go through the length of the assignment, creating transparency there is very, very important. So those are a few things. And if that chemistry between the coach and the co-coach is not good, it's very visible to the team, and that itself can disrupt the assignment. So there is some risk there. So therefore, it's important that you set it up well. Okay. So now, how can you create some safety given the complexity of the assignment? What are some things that we need to be mindful of? So one of the first things is choosing the assignment wisely. A lot of times we are very enthusiastic, to go in and do an assignment, but later on you shouldn't regret. And therefore, spending a good amount of time before you sign up a contract is very, very important. And you need to have an initial hypothesis where you get a good brief saying, why are they engaging in team coaching? What is the problem that they're trying to solve? What's going on with that team? Who are the stakeholders? What are their expectations? Having a one-on-one conversation with the leader. Is the leader even bought into it, or are stakeholders trying to solve a leadership problem by pushing in team coaching? So kind of stepping into that zone becomes important. And then I would always have individual conversations with, if it's a smaller team, then all of them, otherwise a few of them, or, a group of them, whatever works for you based on how much time you have. But it is important to read the room and the team well before you start. Then the contracting part of it, again, it's very important that you have a scope which is clearly defined. A lot of times you'll find a lot of scope creeping in and the budget's not moving in the same fashion. So therefore, how do you clearly scope and take a good amount of time to do the estimation of the effort involved? And about 30% globally, what they do is about 30% of the assignment cost is just budgeted pre-coaching, right? The number of times you meet with the clients, the diagnostic work that you do, all of that actually takes your time as a coach. So it's important that you set that much aside for pre-contracting and then look at hours and the length of the assignment and how you go about from there. The other thing is, I say, trust your gut. Yeah, basically, if you sniff it out that there is trouble there, and this may not be a great assignment for whatever reasons, it could vary from, it's a hopeless assignment and you may not be able to create the impact, to the extent of the client not ethically being able to honor commitments that are made contractually, etc. You might want to really trust your gut there. Never ignore if you're getting that sixth sense that something's not right there. And the other important thing is you shouldn't be having vested interest in that team. So if you're trying to do team coaching for your skip level team, that's a bad idea. Or if you're trying to do team coaching for a company in which you're invested, that's a bad idea because your own interests sometimes can come into conflict and it can get you into various kinds of dynamics. So it's always avoidable to go into places where you have a vested interest. Yeah, so those are some things. Now we'll go into two parts of it. One is we're going to focus on the being side of a team coach and what are important things there. But there's also a doing side, which is out of scope for our session today. But that is basically gaining competence in the modality, in getting the right level of training, creating some experience. So when I did my course, they made us do an internship of doing 2 assignments, and that was very helpful. So and it's always advisable to do an internship pro bono if you've not started team coaching already, because that gives you a little bit more confidence and leeway in how you go about the assignment. There's a lot of research that is coming out now on team coaching. So for instance, David Clutterbuck keeps coming up with newer papers, and similarly, Jonathan Passmore is another person. So there are a whole bunch of these coaches who are doing a lot of research, and it is good to read those papers because they give you a lot of ideas on specifically what can go wrong, and at the same time, what can you do about it, and when not to get into an engagement. All of those, you get research data. So reading is very important, and ongoing learning, like different forums and like a community of practice. So I'm sure over these sessions, Ravi's been at it for a while, you're learning a lot. And supervision is also highly recommended. Yeah. So ICF, in fact, strongly recommends supervision in case of team coaching, given the complexity that it has. And that becomes a space where you have an added supervisor's lens and you're able to reflect and go over the assignment and get more richer insights and feedback and avoid some mistakes. So in some of the supervision sessions that I went, I found that, for instance, in my initial assignments, I used to take on a lot on me, whereas there is a boundary, and it's not like you have to solve for them. You have to help them solve for themselves and be self-sustaining over a period of time. So I was missing out on that agenda, and that perspective from the supervisor helped me pull back and say, okay, I don't have to put so much pressure on myself. The other part of it is the being of a team coach, and which is more about your own internals, like we mentioned, the emotions you go through, the insecurities, the anxieties, the inadequacies, the self-critic inside, imposter syndrome, what have you, feeling unprepared, feeling less powerful than a bunch of honchos in the room. So these can be things that work on our being and take away our confidence. And so what can we do in the moment? And the other is the team's being, they being there, focused together, collaborating, participating equitably, and not very uneven. All of that is important. So our session today is going to be focused more on the being aspects. And we're going to do some guided practices and reflections that can help you get this going. Yeah, I just wanted to take a pause here and check in with everyone. Is everyone with me so far? Any questions? We all good? Okay. So I don't know if no news is good or bad. I'll assume it is good.
So
Okay.
with your permission, Lata, since we're small,
Just a small query.
Yes.
The answer may be long, but my query is small.
Yes.
What's the sense of promote team autonomy and sustainability? I mean, they appear together. Can you throw a little light on the two of them separately and what happens when they come together?
Yeah.
Thanks.
So that's a good question, Dexter. Thanks for that. So the team's autonomy is in terms of their resourcefulness is never compromised, right? And so therefore, whether it is solving a problem, coming up with ideas, trying to diagnose what needs attention and how do you solve for that, those are things that the team, and when we say the team here, it is the leader included, but not necessarily directive by the leader. So that's the autonomy part of it. The sustainability part of it refers more to the team having the whole construct of the team coaching assignment, as we all know, is that at some point the coach hands it over to the team and they are able to self-coach and we get out of the engagement. So that's the sustain part of it. Right. And when both of that work well, that's a successful engagement. So that becomes a measure of the team really being resourceful enough to solve their problems and self-coach themselves, which is really the benchmark for a good coach. Does that help?
Absolutely. In fact, it is the bottom line of team coaching, finally to get there. Thanks for explaining that so succinctly. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Dexter.
As a follow-up question to Dexter, Lata. So
Yes, Sudha.
in your experience of team coaching, how has your experience been in terms of working towards achieving this autonomy and sustainability for teams? While I know that's the overall objective of team coaching and that's a good space to be in, but how has your experience in reality been?
Yeah, so one, Sudha, like we all know, the clients have limited budget, and at some point they're going to throw you out. So, and it's in your interest to leave on a note where they find results and call you back for other assignments. So therefore, we're very conscious going in that we really want to transfer these skills. So in case of a French company where I was working with a team, they were having a number of problems and there was a huge transformation going on in the organization and work was moving to the team here and it was quite complex work that was getting moved into India and it was again shared between UK and India and that was the whole construct of the assignment. I won't go into the details, but what was happening was there was a lot of frustration on both sides and they did not have in place basic processes for transferring knowledge and for the learning curve. And therefore, and the team here, for whatever reasons, culturally, if it is not set up well, there's a lot of difference. I mean, they would feel inadequate that we don't know this. But it's absolutely fine to say that I don't know this and to have some process in place which will bubble up what is the problems that they're facing. So just taking them through some of these methods of working through a problem. So which is where the directive element comes, but you don't give your method of knowledge transfer or your method of, solving problems or bubbling issues up or having a risk log, whatever in their system works. But just question of, have you thought about this? Do you think this would help? And setting up some regular conversation. So it was about 6 months. And at the end of it, the team had these skills and you could leave them with that and move on. And that worked out well for them. So sometimes it's just the chaos where they need somebody to come in and help sort out. There's been a lot of escalation and that's the time when they call you in. I mean, the leader could have done it, but I'm sure the next time he'll do it by himself.
There's another question in the chat. I'm sorry. There's another question in the chat section. What may be the segue from doing to being? How may we switch from former to latter?
So it's not an either or. We have to do and we have to be. And we have to keep navigating from one to the other. So, and I appreciate that question because this was just a perspective I brought into the session that the doing is more of the competence and skills and attitudes that we bring. But the being is, being in the moment, dancing in the moment, listening well, all of the team coaching competencies, all of that come into play. But there is a layer beneath that, even the competencies can be quite academic in that sense, that how do you actually evoke awareness? How do you really practice presence? Right. So that's the being part. And it's more of guided practices that I've brought in today. You can have your own versions of that. Like today, when we started out, we did a centering practice. And I said, you could even Google for, a minute to arrive, which was a practice born in Google, widely available, and pick that up or see what works in your team. Sometimes, being is just about reminding ourselves that everything's going to be all right. So I'm currently going through a year-long executive coaching training program with a brilliant cohort of people. And our lead facilitator said this, and I think that's so true of team coaching too. He said, don't get stressed out by the seniority and what is at stake in that assignment. That coachee of yours, of course, in an executive coaching setting, they were talking about that executive, had a life before they came to you for coaching, and they have a life after they came to you for coaching. So your coaching is just a small line in between in the larger scheme of life. So we don't have to, put so much pressure on ourselves. And that's true for the team coaching as well. The team has a life before and after. So as long as you don't make it worse, and that could be an inner dialogue, right? To evoke our agency in times when we feel more anxious about what to do and feel a little lost. So that's more about the being. How do we see it in perspective? Yeah. I hope that helps.
There's another
Okay.
question, Lata, which says,
Okay, we're getting into Q&A now, and I'm a little worried, Ravi.
So we'll do that later towards the end.
Yeah, we'll do that later. Yeah, sorry. Because we just need to get on with the practice, which is what was promised. Okay. So looking at the being, and like I said, the whole and ontology aspect of coaching is about, how am I doing as a coach and how are we doing as co-coaches? That's very important to look into. And what can be some practices? Now, there are a lot of practices out there. And the Western world, of course, is very research focused. And therefore, what we see there are practices that have literally been tested out with, brain scans and EEG and respiratory and heart systems and all of that. And then we have traditional practices that are homegrown and sit well within our culture. I think the last few years, people, particularly post-pandemic, have opened themselves to some of these. As long as we keep it secular and acceptable to everyone and easy to practice, and be okay with the fact that there will be a 5-10% of your population which is not, and just keeping it welcoming and inviting and acknowledging that could be a great way to start with some guided practices. But as a team coach, you necessarily need to have a bunch of tools and practices that you can comfortably guide when you're working with a team. And we're going to look at that in an overview. So there are things that you can do pre-session. And that's what I say, like having a routine or a ritual for yourself before going into a coaching engagement. So, some of you might have those rituals if you're not team coaching yet, even for your individual coaching. It's very important to get into that space. So if there is an in-person coaching session, a good coach would always turn up 15 minutes before so that, you've gone through the security and you've had a glass of water, you're comfortable in the room, and you're ready to welcome the coachee. I mean, that's a fundamental ask of coaching assignments. Now, in case of a team coaching, it gets even more complex because you're probably working with a co-coach. There is some logistics and things to be sorted out. So it makes sense to, and if it's online, then setting up for that, making sure that the link is there, the room is open, your material is ready. All of that is the doing. But there is also being. How do we manage our own internals? It is said that, for instance, public speaking or being put out there is one of the biggest fears that people have after the fear of death, right? And not all of us are born extroverts. So we do feel a little nervous when we have to be in front of a bunch of people. And if they are more senior, then sometimes you start feeling a little small about yourself, all of those things. So what can you do to manage some of those anxieties? Having a little ritual around that is important. The other is when you get started, how do you join the team's energy? So how do you get someone who is very distracted and someone who is just not participating, and all kinds of dynamics in the room. How do you bring it to an acceptable bare minimum standard? You need some tools for that. And then post session, a coach's life is a very examined life. And I've been teaching courses on journaling, and this is not a cross sell, so I'm not bringing it here, but I've researched this topic for a long time. And they have found that what coaching does is really, and if you look at it from a neuroscience point of view, the prefrontal cortex, right, this part of the brain, which is also called the executive center of the brain, is a place where you can get a lot of insights. And reflection post anything helps you get a lot of insights. It's like watching your own movie in slow motion, right? A rewind, right? And so many things get magnified when you just sit down, or maybe you and the co-coach sit down and do a little download and see, what did you notice? And what happened here? Or what did that mean? And sometimes you think of it in a certain way in the conversation, but when you go out of the room and see it in the larger context, it means something else completely different. So reflection is a very, very powerful exercise. And I would say everybody should reflect, whether it's your individual assignment or whether it is your team coaching assignment. I, in fact, write notes after every coaching session. If my coachee allows, I take Zoom notes with their permission, and then I validate, because Zoom also hallucinates when it's taking notes. So you need to check in and see whether it got it right. And you compare notes and you form a case history of that coachee. And what you find is, when you compare your notes over a period of time and before going into each session, you are able to pick it up exactly where you left it. And that note taking and reflection is a very important element. The note taking is the doing, but reflection is the being of a team coach. So broadly, I'm classifying them into 3 different kits. Yeah. Now, one is a check-in, right? Just doing a check-in with everyone and helping them relax. But before that, you're relaxing yourself. So what can you do to relax? Let's say you arrived just 7 minutes before you have to start the engagement. What are some practices that you can do? Anyone wants to share? What do you do to just get yourself centered after the
Breathing,
traffic? Yeah, Rekha.
breathing exercises.
Yeah,
Breathing. And what do you
deep
practice?
breathing usually.
Deep breathing. Let's do one. Okay. So I invite you to sit upright, away from the back of your chair. This one is called box breathing, and it's basically an even count breathing, highly researched and found to be hugely effective, both for centering as well as controlling anxiety. So you'll find a number of YouTube videos, including mine, on box breathing, but it's a very simple thing. What is a box? It's a square that is equal, right? So you inhale to the same count, you hold your breath to the same count, you exhale to the same count, you hold your breath out before the next inhale to the same count. Now, different of us can have very different respiratory capacity, stamina, etc. There might be underlying conditions if you have some respiratory conditions or cardiac conditions. So choose a very comfortable count. You can choose a count of 4 or 5. But if you are very fit and you have longer breath capacity, if you do 8, 10, 12, that's even better to get into the zone. So I'm going to invite you to do 3 rounds of box breathing. So you don't have to do anything right now. You're in safe hands. Just sit back, close your eyes, and just make sure your feet are connected to the floor. The spine is nice and tall, like we did in the beginning. The shoulders are relaxed. You can place your palm at the junction of thigh and abdomen, and close your eyes, lifting your gaze up. If you keep it down, you could fall asleep, which is why we lift it up. And I'll count for you. Inhale. Hold the breath. Exhale. And now stop before your next in-breath. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Hold the breath out. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Hold the breath out. And with your next in-breath, just resume your normal breathing. And when you're ready, just bring yourself back and softly open your eyes. Okay. So this has been found to be a wonderful practice. Ideally, you should be doing it 5 to 6 rounds. Today, we are just dabbling with things, and I'm a little pressured on time now. So we did a short version, but you could increase the count. Yeah. And the slower it becomes, the longer it becomes, the calmer the mind. There's a huge connection between the body, the breath, and the mind. And when your heart is agitated with emotions, your breath is rapid. You know this, when you get angry, you're almost panting, right? And when you're relaxed and joyful, then the breath is very slow. So, what we're trying to do here is relaxing the breath so that the brain and the body get the message that everything is fine. It's just a little bit of anxiety that I want to get over. And they all calm down and you're your best self. So, that was a little practice that you could take into your coaching sessions, whether it's individual or team. It works brilliantly and it's well researched. I'll just take a moment to share my screen. So you could do this with your client as well. You could take them through a box breathing exercise and just at the end of it, ask them to sit still and focus on the breath. And that would be a good centering practice for them as well. So you could apply it either ways. Another powerful tool is visualization. Okay. And the mind has, I'm talking to a bunch of coaches here, so don't want to preach to the choir, but I think you've all come across visualizations in coaching, right? It's a very, very powerful tool. And the way to do a good visualization is a few things, right? So I've got some tips for you here. Help people relax and then help them focus. The imagery, make it more engaging of multiple senses. So it's not just the seeing, but it's also the hearing, maybe the sense of smell, the taste. So the more elaborate you make it, the more easier it becomes for them to experience it powerfully. And it is important to pause. So, when we are beginners, we tend to get a little anxious and we tend to do it a little fast. But you have to remember to slow down. So, one tip that I have for you is record yourself once or twice and play it back and try to do it yourself and see how it works. And if you find some chinks, fix that. And then you know that the stool is yours and you can go from there. And the other important element is bringing them back. Sometimes people go in, and then if you suddenly abruptly close, they feel some kind of a closure is missing and they can feel a little disturbed. So it is very important that you bring them back. And the underlying principle is whatever you do in the visualization, it should be a very, very safe practice. There should be no fear, because the moment we go into fear, we lose all our resources and it's anxiety that gets triggered again. So I'm going to do a guided visualization with all of you, if you're up for it. Yeah. So again, I invite you to sit upright, nice and tall. And you can just take a moment to just blink 2, 3 times, just resting the eye. You've been looking at the screen for a while, just blink. And then consciously relax and close your eyes. And you can just follow my voice. On the screen of your mind, imagine you're walking into a forest, a very safe forest, which is beautiful and green. And as you walk along, You see a stream flowing through the forest. It is a very safe, gentle stream that is gurgling. And you take a moment to sit by the side of the stream and dip your feet into the water. The cool water is washing away all the stresses and strains from your feet. You can hear the stream, and you can hear birds chirping at a distance. There is the fragrance of forest flowers that you can smell. And you're taking a moment to savor the beautiful day. The sun is shining pleasantly, and you can feel the warmth of its rays on your arms. Bathed in light, joyfully, your heart sings along with the birds. Enjoying that beauty of nature, sit still in that forest for a minute. And you've enjoyed this refreshing moment. And slowly now walk yourself back into the room, letting go of that forest scene, but bringing back memories and the rejuvenation you feel. Feel yourself on the chair and your feet on the ground. You can hear the sounds around you in the room. And when you're ready, softly open your eyes. So that was a little exercise, a guided imagery. And I hope you found it relaxing. And it should be done with a lot more time, right? But this is a sampler learning session, so it's running very fast. But this is something that you can create your own version. I did a course in transpersonal psychology, and there they even go to the extent of saying, tell them to go to their favorite place, right? But you have to be very attentive and centered, and you should practice this a few times before you try it on a group where you're paid to do it. Because you don't want to make mistakes. It can be quite jarring if they don't feel safe or some other things come into play. But just try out, and in a team coaching setting, the added thing. So this can be like an opener, right? Just like the minute to arrive. But you can have other versions of it. Like sometimes I do this with the team where you're saying, step into your team situation. Think of your stakeholders, think of your customers, see how they experience your work. Or it could be, what is a moment that you're really proud of in your work so far? What was that moment? What was happening? What were people around you saying? What did you love most about it? What do you cherish? So you can have things like that, but guided imagery is a very powerful practice to help people center, to feel more calm, to be more resourceful, and even to feel, they can even solve a problem by visualization. So there are so many layers to it. And you would use techniques that you deem fit based on where the team is. And the other important, an occupational hazard that can happen there, not everybody is good at imagination. Okay. So some of them are more thinking rather than feeling. So how you balance that and give more substance to the imagery again becomes important, and tuning into the style of people. So knowing them will give you some sense, and then you kind of customize. But visualizations are very powerful. They can be very work oriented in terms of that team's context, or they can be generic like this one. So that's again something that helps both you as well as the team. Yeah. Okay. I think I'll quickly move to the section reflection. Yeah. So another thing that you can do in a similar context is ask people to share a day in their life. And this is particularly in the beginning of coaching sessions. If you ask people, everybody get a sense of what the other person is doing. And that becomes a beautiful way of joining them up together. And you don't need an icebreaker. This is a very meaningful icebreaker, what everyone is doing. And at the same time, tell them to just talk about, briefly, laser speak, 1 minute each, kind of a framework, so that it's not like everyone's trying to impress everybody else. You can give your own day, you can set some norms and get them to talk. And stories are very powerful. Each one's story is very powerful. So that's something. The other important element is reflective practices, right? So taking stock. And here again, you can have guided practices around reflection. But the power of a reflection is that it really helps you process that experience in minute detail and in high resolution. So we say intuition. My spiritual teacher, Paramahansa Yogananda, used to say you should break intuition into in and tuition. So tuition from within rather than outside. So it's beyond all the theories and frameworks. It's coming from your own learning. And that's what journaling is. It's a reflective practice. And it is about you do. So I'll just come to a slide in terms of the mechanics of it, but you're balancing reason and emotion. Right. And the purpose is to generate insights which you would not have otherwise generated. So that is the power of journaling. And every coach should journal, is my recommendation. Even after every individual coaching assignment, you should journal. So what do you journal for as a practice? You should journal for facts. What happened there? What was shared, what was important there, not everything. It's not like a diary, but the facts. So you also do different levels of listening, right? So you should, what it helps is it's a virtuous cycle. It feeds into how you listen for facts, you listen for feelings, and then you create insights. So similarly, when you're journaling, you're looking at what were the facts that were shared, what were the feelings that the coachee experienced, what were the feelings that the team experienced? What were the feelings that I experienced? And then when I put all of that together, what is the story that is building? And therefore, what insights am I harvesting out of this reflection? Which is why journaling is a very, very powerful practice. Yeah. So we had a look at these being tools, having your own routine, how you set up, sipping a glass of water, cracking a joke, but coming prepared with all of that are also good ways of coming into a session, doing a guided visualization, bringing them to all focus and be centered. And then in session, you find ways of joining the energies. Breathing is a powerful practice. Box breathing is something that you could do. A minute to arrive is something that you could do. And your own reflections, as well as you could also ask the team to reflect at the end of the session, which again becomes a powerful insight. So that's a little bit of some things that you could do in practice. And I hope play with them, experiment, make them your own, see what works for you, what sits well with who you are and feels very authentic to you. So wishing a very festive Diwali season where you light from inside is my wish for you. And I'd like to now open it up for questions. We can take a few questions.
So with your permission, Lata, can we all quickly come on video and take a group photograph?
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Sudha, you'll help us with the pictures as usual, as always.
Yeah, sure, I will.
Both the sheets.
Yeah, we have 2 sheets. Yeah, give me a time. I will.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm going with the first one on the screen. All right. Can all of us smile? Give me a sec. Let me get into the next. Moving on to the second. Smile, please. Yeah, we are done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Q&A.
Yeah.
Lata, we have another 8
And
minutes.
Ravi was saying there was one question that I had abruptly stopped. So maybe we could start with that and
Sure.
then take it more.
So the question was, do team coaching competencies need to be practiced more rigorously as compared to the regular ICF CC8?
That's a good question. So this is the doing part of it, right? And so to be a competent team coach, we need to be cognizant of all the competencies. And I think the richness of it comes in your own flavor to it, in terms of what you see happening on the ground as you are practicing these. Uh, and the individual team coaching competencies are a very good base foundation for the team coaching competencies. And there's a brilliant document that ICF has, which was the output of all the research that they did. And I'm sure, Ravi, you've shared it as part of the community of practice, where they juxtapose the individual and the team coaching competencies. And I would always say, have a copy of it. I, for one, have a printout with me when I'm doing anything team coaching, which is more of knowledge sharing. So that document kind of brings it together and yeah, play with it.
So Lata, I have a question, if I may.
Yes, Ramesh.
Yeah. So when you look at team coaching, I saw your slide early on about what are the expectations from a team coach.
Yes.
Some of the things, at least 2 of the 5 things which were shown, almost resembles the role of the leader of the team.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's in my mind, there's a very, very thin dividing line between a team coach, and if he oversteps his role, then he becomes he's playing the role of what the team leader should be doing. So since the team leader is integral to the definition of team, so I guess one should be careful.
No, absolutely. Yeah. No, that's a brilliant point that you've brought up, Ramesh. And that's the heart of team coaching. Never should we overstep on the leader's role. And therefore, an important element is the contracting that we do with the leader. And it should never be that the leader feels threatened by us. And so everything is done with some amount of boundaries that we keep in mind, so that their power in that team or anything that compromises that does not happen in the session. The other thing there, Ramesh, is that team coaching, a little differently from individual coaching, has multiple modalities. So sometimes you're like a consultant who's solving a problem, and you're kind of consciously calling that out and saying, okay, here we have a problem, and what could be some solutions, and how could we add our experiences? But it's always an invitation where we're inviting ideas from that team as an entity before we put our own on the table. And similarly, there could be times when you are doing facilitation, which is more like, bringing up a here and now situation and trying to surface it and have a conversation which feels safe and trusted in that space. So that safety and minding that space and boundaries become very important. But again, to your point, shouldn't the leader be doing that? Are they outsourcing it to the coach? Is something that plays at the back of our head. But they've not been able to do it, which is why they called us in. So how we do it as a non-invasive surgery is really the art of team coaching.
Thank you.
Okay. The other little thing that I highly recommend as we, sign off today is try to read some good literature on team coaching as well as on emotions and on groups. This combination gives you a lot of breadth and depth to your practice. Being able to tune into emotions, read them accurately, and see how that interplay works in a team setting, as well as understanding group dynamics, as well as teams, the stages of a team, and some of the work around that. So Peter Hawkins, David Clutterbuck, a whole bunch of people have done good work. Catherine Carr, and some like Ruth Wagamore from even before. So you'll find material on ICF website itself and on the learning portal. So these are good things to dip into. There's also a book by Clutterbuck called A Team Coaching Practitioner's Guide, where a number of team coaches have written, and find the recent version. It's a little expensive, but it's a very good investment. So I bought it only when I got a good assignment, and then it helped to really get things together. So the invest in yourself and read and be on top of the research. And it's something beautiful that we curate content and grow with the practice. And it's going to be a fantastic skill for the future because all the work's going to be remote and team. So if there are no further questions, then I'll hand it back to you, Ravi. Thank you.
So gratitude from the bottom of my heart, Lata, for taking the time to host the masterclass for team and group coaching community practice. And thank you, coaches, for joining us this evening. Our next masterclass is scheduled for November 11th. So I've already shared the link in the chat section for all of you to register. And I look forward to seeing you there. Have a great evening ahead and a wonderful week too.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Lata, for this
Thank
wonderful
you.
session.